it's not only data. There's some very good information in here. Some of the insights, some of the things to help you try and navigate this world of uncertainty that seems to be becoming more uncertain. You can understand how different events have a different impact on what's happening in the world of freight.
Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the #1 voice of supply chain. Join us as we share critical news, key insights, and real supply chain leadership from across the globe, one conversation at a time.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton with Supply Chain Now, and I'm joined by my esteemed co-host, Tandreia Bellamy. Tandreia, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Scott. And you were just trying to see if we were paying attention. I know.
We've got a great show teed up here today, a great show. Tandreia, we're continuing a long-running quarterly series here, a popular, informative series that we get a lot of feedback around. We're going to be sharing key insights from the latest quarterly edition of one of the leading transportation industry resources, the U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index for Q1 2025. Now, folks, you all know how we do it by now. Tandreia and I, we have co-hosted a bunch of these over the years. Not only will we be diving into what the data is telling us, but we're going to marry that with boots on the ground, in-market practitioner perspective. And we'll also not only get a good sense of what transpired in the first quarter 2025, but we're also going to be sharing a few nuggets that's going to help you prepare for where we are now and where we're heading. A great show coming up. Tandreia, should be one heck of a show, huh?
Absolutely. And you do such a great job of having guests with myriad backgrounds so that we can get a really well-rounded look at what's going on in the supply chain world.
That is right. And I'll tell you, it has been a fast and furious start as we're approaching halfway through 2025. Goodness. But folks, 3 things before we get started here today. First off, let us know what you think. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to share it with a friend or your network. And number 3, before we jump into the conversation, some valuable context. The U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index, released each quarter, offers tons of intriguing insights. It's based on the massive amounts of data processed through U.S. Bank. Tandreia, get this. Did you know U.S. Bank processed $43 billion worth of transactions last year alone? Tons and tons of data from industry. And that's one of the biggest reasons why U.S. Bank is a great resource for this information that many business leaders leverage out in the marketplace. Tandreia, get a lot of good stuff, a lot of insights, a lot of actionable insights coming up. You ready to go?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get started. And folks, download your own copy of the 2025 Q1 U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index. Follow along, beat it up, spill coffee on it, mark it up. And again, let us know your take on the discussion today. So with all of that said, with the mute button off, we're going to be welcoming in our featured guests here today. Starting with, back by popular demand, the one and only Bobby Holland, Director of Freight Business Analytics at U.S. Bank, and, hey, Dr. Jason Miller with the Eli Broad Endowed Professor of Supply Chain Management Program at Michigan State University. Hey, Bobby, welcome back. How you doing?
Doing well. How's everyone?
Great to see you. And Dr. Jason Miller. Jason, how you doing today? All right. So, Jason, the mute button's got you as well. It's a pesky mute button here today. All right. Here.
I'm in a mute button today. It's just getting us left, right, and center.
Oh, it sure is, folks. It sure is. But hey, that's what happens from time to time. But regardless, folks, Tandreia, Bobby, and Jason, I want to start with a fun warm-up question. And this is going to be one we want y'all to weigh in out there. The folks are following along in the comments, because about a week or so ago, the whole world celebrated May the 4th be with you. That's right. The annual day of Star Wars celebration for fans everywhere. And this is what I ask our panel here. And Jason, I'm going to start with you. Whether it is one of your favorite Star Wars movies or one of your favorite sci-fi movies in general, do you celebrate the May 4th by watching a great film each and every year?
Yeah, well, a little bit, but I'll admit I usually rewind the clock one more week to Alien Week, so April 26th, and see what's going on there. So all-time favorite in that franchise. I'm going to be kind of the dark horse here and pick the third one, Alien 3 by David Fincher. Not the normal pick, but you know what? Sometimes the world doesn't end the way people like it to. So.
That is right. But hey, Sigourney Weaver, what an all-time Hall of Fame actress that, of course, made the Alien franchise what it is, huh?
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I always like it when a director will take something a different route than what people were expecting. And, I always, I love history. So perfect world, I'd be teaching history, but you just don't make much money doing it. So, hey, supply chain, here we are.
Hey, we can't, the global supply chain industry can't lose you, Jason Miller. So you stick with supply chain for us all. So Bobby, and who knows, we might need a Sigourney Weaver for global supply chain, help us save the world here too. But Bobby Holland, tell us your favorite Star Wars film or one of your favorite sci-fi films.
Okay, my favorites are not films; they're actually TV shows from the Star Wars universe. I'm actually a big fan of Andor, especially going into season 2. But for an all-time ultimate sci-fi, The Expanse.
Oh, The Expanse. Okay. I got to check that out. I got to add that to my list. I've heard about Andor. My son, Ben, is a Star Wars consultant. He knows every aspect of that universe, and I've heard big things. But I got to check out The Expanse if it's Bobby Holland recommended. So, Tandreia, between Alien 3 and Andor and The Expanse, what's going to be your go-to sci-fi adventure?
Well, I'm going to go into the Star Wars universe and say Return of the Jedi because of all of the relationships. Luke and Leia, Leia and Hans, Luke and Han, C-3PO and R2-D2. It was just a great movie about relationships.
I love that, Tandreia. I love that. Relationships power the world. They certainly power global supply chain, and that's a great parallel there. And I would add, Tandreia, you're reading my mind. Probably my favorite sci-fi adventure is I saw Return of the Jedi in the movie theater with my mom. And folks, as much as I love streaming these days, is what we're doing right now, there's just something that we've lost about going out to the movie theaters and having like these kindred spirits of the gasp and the cheers and stuff. And that's how it used to be. But regardless, I appreciate all y'all weighing in, and may the 4th certainly be with all of us here today. All right, we got a lot to get into here today, a ton to get into here today. I want to start with this, Bobby. If you had to put today's conversation into a 1-sentence theme, just what would that be?
I would say that we are battling headwinds on multiple fronts as truck freight volumes continue to drop. A lot of interesting numbers this quarter.
Undoubtedly. And did you bring your lightsaber to cut through the data here today? We might need a whole battleship Galacta to get through the data here today. But let's do this. Jason, we really enjoyed having you with us. It was probably about 2 years ago. You and a wonderful cadre of Michigan State University supply chain students from the now generation. But for folks that miss that, or for folks that miss your keynotes and your wonderful insights across social and a whole bunch more, tell us briefly about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a research professor here at Michigan State. Originally started specializing in the trucking space and especially safety, and then sort of branched out from there. But a lot of what I work on now is really at the intersection of economics and supply chain management. And so getting into freight activity, retailing, wholesaling, manufacturing, and really trying to get a sense of the dynamics that's going on there, and then translating that over to how that is likely to affect the freight markets with, again, a specific focus on the U.S. For-hire trucking sector.
That is an important intersection. And again, great to have you back here, Jason. Looking forward to your perspective throughout the discussion. Tandreia, as I mentioned on the front end, you and I have co-hosted a bunch of shows over the years. And some of those shows, you were the rock and roll star because of your significant industry experience, especially in global supply chain. For our newer audience members, maybe this is the first show they're catching. I think it'd be helpful for them to kind of understand a little bit more about your background, as well as how supply chain leaders use things like the U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index.
Well, Scott, 34 years with UPS. First 30 years were in small package, all about standardization, process improvement, efficiency, was involved with the deployment of automation. Actually, when I started with UPS, we were on paper. So watching their whole digital transformation and seeing what it could do to improve our customer supply chain was huge. Last 4 years was in our supply chain solutions group, where it was warehousing and distribution, did some, again, technology deployments, ended my career with our global freight forwarding team. So really got a chance to see the entire supply chain from our customers' perspectives. Since then, I've been doing some consulting, and my most recent endeavor is to become a certified executive coach.
Hey, how about that? A lot of folks going to benefit from that, Tandreia. I'm looking forward to catching up with you over lunch in the Atlanta area soon. When it comes to the immense research, insights, and data in particular, the U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index, how do folks use it in the industry?
And that's the great thing. It's not only data. There's some very good information in here. Some of the insights, some of the things to help you try and navigate this world of uncertainty that seems to be becoming more uncertain. Understanding how the data points connect. Understanding that you can't look at just a national number in aggregate, breaking it out into the regions. So again, you can understand how different events have a different impact on what's happening in the world of freight.
Well said. We need as many lenses to help us decipher this industry on countless levels as we can. All right. So Bobby, for our viewers, again, our audience continues to evolve and expand across the globe. For our new viewers that may not know, share briefly what the U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index is, what it analyzes, and really how it works.
Well, the U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index is our view of the marketplace. It's basically based on, as you pointed out earlier, $43 billion worth of payment transactions, the data accumulated. We measure shipments and spend, produce those metrics. We have a national overview, and then we also do the regional breakdown. And we do quarter over quarter, year over year measurements of those metrics and comparisons. We've also incorporated, as you're showing now, some data, some rates related data from our new partner, DAT. So that adds some weight to some of the things that we talk about regularly in the commentary. And then basically what the index measures, it's a quarterly chain-based index, measures in a same-store sales type of comparison, like buckets of activity between quarters, and then again, the year over year. So it's another data point for the marketplace.
That's right. I appreciate that clarity, Bobby. And congrats, as we shared, I think last time we all got together, adding more value with the data from DAT on the freight rates. That's an outstanding addition. So I appreciate that call out there, Bobby. Okay. We got a lot to get into, Tandreia, Bobby, and Jason. And I want to start, Bobby, as we got 8 key takeaways from the Q1 2025 Freight Payment Index. Let's start. I think we've got 3 key takeaways from a national perspective. So, Bobby, tell us more.
Well, nationally, the first quarter saw a lot of interesting weather patterns. We're looking at severe winter storms. We're looking at wildfires in California. Then there's obviously the tariff uncertainty that is top of mind for people in this business. And then on top of that, we have, flat retail sales. And so it led to, national declines in quarterly and yearly shipment and spend volumes. Then we also have the fact that national shipments dropped for the 11th consecutive quarter. However, the year over year declines were smallest. So again, we kind of see perhaps, I won't say bottoming out, but maybe a softer landing. And then we also see on the variations in the regional results in Q1, we have the Northeast posting increases for the first time in 11 quarters, but then we saw some very anomalous numbers in the Southwest region with a 40% drop in year over year shipments. And that's the largest decline we've recorded from our data. So a lot of, like I said, a lot of weird numbers, a lot of weird things in general going on this quarter.
Undoubtedly, a lot to get into. So, Jason, that begs a question with you and Tandreia. Jason, when you check out the national scope of the Q1 2025 U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index, what else did you see in Q1?
Yeah, so Q1, even looking, beyond other data, is as Bobby mentioned, it was just an odd quarter. From a standpoint, you had the big sort of slowdowns in January due to the extreme weather. But you also had, for example, parts of chemical production that were very, very, very robust these first few months, paintings and coatings and things like that, as well as fertilizers that don't necessarily affect the dry van space quite as much, but some of the the local piece. And so Q1 it's an interesting quarter because you did have some signs in various industries of improving conditions. Aerospace sector, for example, is doing substantially better right now. We just had the announcement that Boeing's deliveries for this April were double what their deliveries were the prior April. But you also have sectors that remain essentially in sort of the doldrums from where they were, or even sectors like beverage production, which had been sort of a shining light of manufacturing that's shown some substantial weakening. So overall, it was kind of, just for lack of a better term, an odd quarter. And now we're just characterized by this tremendous uncertainty taking place at the moment.
Yep. Well said, Jason. Tandreia. He touched on a lot of things there, from chemicals to aerospace to beverages, kind of a mixed bag of activity and results and outcomes. Your thoughts nationally from first quarter, Tandreia?
My thoughts are freight used to be an afterthought. It was one of the things that your marketing teams didn't think about, your production teams, unless they were missing inventory, didn't really think about. Finance just knew it as a line item. What is going on in the supply chain and with the movement, both inbound and outbound, of product? What's going to happen in warehousing? What can potentially happen with inventories? These are going to need to be very cross-functional conversations that happen in all aspects of decision-making across all industries. And I think some of the things in this freight index really point that out. This uncertainty is here, certainly.
I love that. And it is not an afterthought any longer. Excellent comments there, Tandreia. All right. So Bobby, Jason, and Tandreia, this is what we're going to do next. I love as really all three of y'all may have spoken to, I love the regional take where we kind of dive into 5 regions across the U.S. and get a little more market specific in what we're seeing and what we saw across first quarter 2025. So Bobby, where we want to go next is we want to go to the West region, the wild, wild West. So Bobby, key takeaways from what we saw there.
Well, again, as everyone is well aware, there were catastrophic wildfires in Southern California. But despite that, there was strong port activity and robust factory output. And this basically kept the West to moderate quarterly and yearly gains in shipments. Shipments were 1% quarterly and 1.5% year over year, which, as given the recent numbers, that's good. Yep. So we like to see that. And then spend, we're only down 1.4% quarter over quarter, but annually we're up 0.6%. So that, again, good numbers considering where we've been.
Okay. All things considered is the phrase that your comments bring to my mind, which is a great show on NPR, by the way. All right. So Dr. Jason Miller, out there in that West region, your key takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is, as Bobby mentioned, you had the wildfires and the disruptions. And then, of course, the West Coast ports had a nice boost of activity as importers were bringing products in, really more than anything to get around the concerns with the East Coast port strike. We saw the Western railroads, BNSF and UP were posting record intermodal container movements. Certainly stronger year over year growth in comparison to the Eastern railroads. And so, and the other big thing is now that the Boeing strike has resolved itself, that is a huge benefit for that entire ecosystem in the Seattle area. Because when we lost those operations with the strike back in September, October, that took out almost 25% of U.S. aircraft and parts production.
Man, okay. Tandreia, a mixture of planes, trains, and automobiles from Jason there. What do you see taking place out west?
It's going to be interesting to look at the West as we move forward. We talked about planes, trains, and automobiles. We're going to also have to talk about ships. There's quite a few either cancellations or blank sailings that can definitely import what's happening in the West as we look forward.
Yeah. I tell you what, the late John Candy and Steve Martin, that should be the sequel. Planes, trains, automobiles, and container ships. Gene Soroka, executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, he was quoted in the Wall Street Journal as saying, quote, "Your refrigerator, outdoor patio set, regular stub is not going to come and flood the marketplace because we've gone from 145% to 30%. Of course, he's talking about the tariffs and the tentative and still emerging deal when it comes to China and the U.S. And one of the quick factoid for some of y'all that may not know, Port of L.A., the busiest container port in North America, and has been for a couple of decades now. I love my factoids. Jason, you're a big history fan. I am too. Supply chain history. Big old supply chain history nerd. All right. So we're going to go from the west to the southwest region, Bobby. And tell us what you saw there in the southwest.
Yeah, this was one of the crazier results regionally because we saw historic declines in quarterly of 21.2% and yearly 40.1% in shipment volumes declines. But this region also had the highest gains in spend, 7.3% quarterly or quarter over quarter and 6% year over year. So again, when you look at some of the factors that could have contributed to that, we're looking at the bizarre weather that occurred where places in the southwest were, seeing, not just a snowstorm, but, prolonged winter weather that they're definitely not prepared for. But then also, so that leaves it with the potential with all of the things that were going on, as well as, some of the cross-border activity. But all that's going on, it just meant that whatever freight shipments were there, are extremely expensive to ship. So again, just an interesting thing that we're going to be watching, quarters going forward, just to see if that was an anomaly but that's what we saw.
And when Bobby Holland says he's going to be watching something, I'm going to tell you, he's got not just one pulse, but that's right. The binoculars, 4 fingers on the pulse. Jason, when it comes to the Southwest, your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of what Bobby said. When you get a reading that's a little abnormal, I think you intentionally go for more of a conservative approach and say, okay, we're not going to read that much into it, and try to sort of step back and see what's taking place. And then it also becomes very important to think about what are some of the key shippers, within that region that could help explain some of these dynamics. And so what I would say is anytime you get one of those readings that may not, may be a little odd, you just say, okay, since COVID, weird things happen. Seasonality factors do not follow their typical pattern. I am curious if a little bit of it could be a later produce season, coming out of AZ and things of that sort.
Interesting. We'll see what the second quarter and then the summer holds to that point, to that end. Tandreia, when we talk about the Southwest, your observation or two?
I went and I tried to research a couple of different ways and just really could not come up with any consensus across the various data points. Trust U.S. Bank immensely, but just wanted to see what other information was out there. And as engineers and other people who have very logical thought processes and backgrounds, so far today, I've heard weird, odd, and crazy. So I'm not exactly sure what is going on with the Southwest.
Now, that is a great observation, and I think a great way even further to describe not only the first quarter, but the commentary on the first quarter. Let's see, I want to add one nugget here. So the Southwest, of course, includes the big market in the big state of Texas, big manufacturing producer. Get this, from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. And again, folks, we're trying to bridge, not only are we going to dive into first quarter, but we're kind of bridging from first quarter and the second quarter, so we get a sense of not only where we've been, but where we are now and where we're headed. Get this. Texas manufacturing activity continued to grow modestly in April, right? The start of second quarter. However, new orders dropped 20 points. And this second one may not surprise anybody. Raw materials price index, the reading jumped 11 points, which is the highest reading since mid-2022. Those raw materials input prices. So we'll see where we go from here. All right. We are going to go from the Southwest to the Midwest region. So, Bobby, what'd you see going on first quarter in the Midwest?
Well, the Midwest was affected by softer manufacturing output, a drop in housing starts, and this region, big impact from that. So it led to the second straight quarter with declines in yearly and quarterly shipments and spend. They were, not as 6.9% quarter over quarter in shipments, 5.5% quarter over quarter in spend. So they weren't plunges, but they, certainly are not inspiring numbers right now.
Yep. All right. So Jason, Midwest, what'd you see?
It was a horrible winter here, so that does not surprise me at all that the housing start piece would have certainly been weaker. And again, the auto plants, you had a combination of New Year's Day falling in the middle of the week, and quite a few plants just decided, hey, we're just not going to bring folks back. And so that cut into some of the January volume. And then again, you had the terrible weather that really pulled down auto production in January. So none of this surprises me, given how tied Midwest output is to the health of the auto sector.
Yep. Good thoughts there. Tandreia, the Midwest, your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I think we need to have meteorologists on staff because weather has been mentioned across the board. And, with contingency planning and everything else, sometimes that is overlooked, the impact. And we say we have winter every year. Well, you don't have snow in Florida and Louisiana every year. So, but really understanding all of the different inputs that can affect these things is just really critical, again, to decision-making and planning.
Well said. I tell you, we do need to have a staff meteorologist here at Supply Chain Now. We're going to look into that. That's a great idea, Tandreia. All right. So Bobby, Jason, and Tandreia, I want to call one thing out. Housing is always important in every single U.S. bank freight payment index. And there's a great some factoids I came across earlier. Now, this is housing, a snapshot of housing in March, for a stretch in March, from the U.S. Census Bureau. Now, get this. For the month of March, nationally, building permits were slightly down year over year. In fact, on this little snapshot, you see permits starting to go down below starts and completions. And of course, permits is a forward-looking snapshot, perhaps, of where the housing industry is going. It's a big factor in the overall economy. And of course, a big factor when it comes to freight. So building permits slightly down for March year over year. Housing starts up about 2% year over year. And housing completions up about 4% year over year. So we'll see what that was for March. We'll see what April and the rest of the second quarter brings us. All right, let's see here. We are going from the Midwest. Here's a brighter region. I think one of the brightest regions in this edition, and that is the Northeast. So, Bobby, what did we see there in the Northeast region?
Well, usually when we talk about the Northeast region, we talk about consumer spending. It's a very dense region, small region, punching above its weight, size-wise. Strong retail sales and uptick in import volumes actually helped give us some good numbers for the Northeast. 3.6% quarter over quarter up in shipments and 4.1% in spend. And then also annually 2.1% up in spend and 2.3%. And 2.1% in shipments and 2.3% in spend. So very solid quarter for the Northeast region.
So that's good news. And I love good news. There's always some good news if you go seeking it, I think. Jason, what did you see going on in the Northeast?
Like Bobby mentioned, retail sales were pretty strong in the quarter. If you look at the Philadelphia Fed's manufacturing data was very strong at the start of the quarter, especially January. They had a phenomenal new order reading. It was like a positive 41. And so part of this could be regional manufacturing composition as well. Like I mentioned, the chemical sector has been doing very well in the U.S. so far this year based on the industrial production data. And the Northeast bats disproportionately for that industry.
Yep. All right. So, Tandreia, I can't wait to hear. I love Bobby and Jason's take on the Northeast. I can't wait to hear your observation here.
One of the things that was a call out in the payment index from the Northeast was that shippers had to pay more to have freight move. Part of that was simply due to more freight being transported. But in this, when you talk about shippers having to pay more to have freight move, one of the things that we're going to need to keep an eye on is we're starting to have smaller freight companies that are going out of business. One of the ones that was recently was LTI, about 300 trucks, 250 drivers. But as we start to see smaller freight companies exiting the market, we could end up with a capacity concern, even though overall freight is down. So again, something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's an excellent call out. Potential capacity crunch in the months ahead. All right, so one quick, let's see, I want to, retail, of course, is mentioned all regions and, of course, nationally. This comes from CNBC, NRF, National Retail Federation, Retail Monitor, and this is for April 2025. And I think Jason and or Bobby both spoke to this. Total retail sales, and this excludes automobiles and gasoline, for April 2025, up 0.72% month over month and up 6.76% year over year. Now, again, that excludes automotive and gasoline. But speaking of automotive, CNBC shared that auto sales, because folks, they're getting ahead of the tariff impact. Auto sales up 5.3% in March, and early numbers for April seem to be promising. So we'll see. We'll see if that was only tariff related or anything else in the works there. All right, Bobby, Jason, and Tandreia, we are going to talk about the Southeast now, the Southeast region. So, Bobby, what do we see in the Southeast?
Southeast, as we again are aware of, where the atypical winter storms, modest retail sales, and then flat manufacturing were impacts to this region. So we saw 1.7% drop quarter over quarter in shipments, and a 7% quarter over quarter in spend. So again, quarterly numbers definitely feel like the weather, because again, not only was it atypical weather, but it was atypical for the duration. It wasn't just a hit or miss. It lasted for a few days, and we know that that's going to impact shippers and carriers' ability to. They can't just go make up the difference once the weather changes. So big impact there.
Excellent call out. Weather again, Tandreia. Weather again. All right. So, Jason, the Southeast, your observations there.
Yeah. So again, we keep talking about weather so much, but I know I've got good friends down at Auburn, and the extent of the winter weather, down there was certainly, I think, surprising to folks. So, and again, you've got an economy that is increasingly tied to the auto sector down there. And so again, slower activity in the auto industry in general was a little bit of a tailwind.
Okay.
Or a headwind, I apologize.
Hey, Jason, I get those confused all the time. Headwinds and tailwinds. And yes, there was a shock to the system with what the weather delivered a lot throughout the South earlier this year. It's a great call out, and kudos to a big shout out to your friends down there at Auburn, the home of the Tigers, and I guess War Eagle too. Two mascots down in Auburn. All right, Tandreia, home base for us. We both call Metro Atlanta home. Your thoughts on what we see here in the Southeast?
Retail sales has been a call out for a couple of the regions. A positive in one region, negative or flat in other regions. From a Southeast standpoint, we're going to really have to keep our eye on that as it relates to tourism. There's quite a bit of news that's out about the number of people from other countries who are choosing not to come to the U.S. to partake, to be tourists. I was recently in Orlando, and it was very noticeable. And as we look at retail sales, especially coming into the summer, you usually have an explosion of tourism. And if people aren't coming, then they're not buying.
That's right. Excellent point. Excellent point. And I was in Orlando as well. I was at Gartner Supply Chain Symposium last week. Had a wonderful time. And thankfully, it wasn't 102 degrees and it really humid. It was a nice 80 degrees. So Florida cooperated with the folks down there. Okay. I've got, so Jason and Tandreia, I'm about to get a glimpse, if your crystal ball is working, both of y'all, of what we may see ahead. Jason, in a more broader sense, for you and Tandreia, what are you, if you had to share a couple of things to look for in the months ahead, what would that be, Jason?
Yeah, so the data I'm watching the most closely right now, because it's fairly high frequency, is the data from the Federal Reserve banks in terms of manufacturing activity. We've already mentioned, for example, the Dallas Fed data that comes out towards the end of the month. The New York Fed will release their data here on May 15th already for the month of May. And so I'll be watching that very closely because historically the new orders, especially if you average across the regional banks, tends to be a fairly good approximation for how the trucking sector is going to do in terms of demand. So I'm going to be watching that quite closely in terms of sort of a leading indicator. You already mentioned vehicle sales. That tends to be a very early release. We received the April data like on May 4th or 5th, or May 5th, I believe it released. And so I'll be watching where the May vehicle sales come in at here in early June. And, sort of taking things one piece at a time as the data gets released. I will be curious to see if the Fed's manufacturing data shows any slowdown at all in terms of the upward momentum we were seeing in March. And so we'll see how that pans out in April as well when those data release this week.
Yep. One data point at a time, one day at a time. That's the best way to be taking things right now, I think. Appreciate your look ahead, Jason. All right, so Tandreia, before I get your look ahead, I want to go back. The weather's come up a couple of times here. And Tandreia, here in Georgia, as we've seen some interesting snow weather in the last couple of years, I think we've all made the joke, I don't know, 1,000 times that for the whole state, we've got 2 salt trucks. But Tandreia, I actually looked it up. And the state of Georgia, we might be surprised. We got 401 snow plows. Who would have thunk that? And better yet, 31 brine tankers that has a 5,000 gallon capacity. So there's a bona fide fleet. We'll see. Hopefully we won't have to have that for a long time. But Tandreia, with the freight market moving ahead, I appreciate your call out for potentially a capacity crunch. What else would you suggest folks look out for?
Not necessarily specifically for freight, but one of the things that people may not be fully aware of is with all of the change in tariffs, how much it's changed, how it's changed by country, that has a pretty significant impact on brokerage operations. So you may need to plan for slowdowns or packages being delayed as the brokerage operations are fighting to keep up with exactly what they should be collecting for duties and taxes.
That is another great call out. Man, y'all have been on the ball here today, Jason, Bobby, and Tandreia. What an outstanding show. Jason, as we start to kind of come down the home stretch here, I want to call out your excellent work. In particular, I engage and learn from you the most on LinkedIn. And I think I'm not alone. And I think I've got a little graphic here. I stole this from, I think, earlier this morning. And I love, some subjects are really serious. Other subjects are a little bit more lighthearted. This one, I think you've been asked a lot about the upcoming toy season for holidays, right? And as you always do, you put a data-driven, informed approach here. And so I bet I can't imagine your PowerPoint decks. You must have 1,000 different charts just for this year alone. But quick comment, Jason, based on this research here, quick comment of what the toy season for this year's holiday season may look like.
Yeah, so when you think about what we have is typically toy imports peak in September and October, but usually the orders would already have been placed by now. And so what I think we'll be seeing is a rush to get those items here that are the best sellers for which the importers have the most confidence for. Same for Christmas items. It's going to be focusing on best sellers as well as the goods that can be produced immediately. And so what that really means is more than anything is as consumers don't expect the degree of product variety this fall when we're doing our Christmas shopping that we're normally used to. Because right now the goal is to get the stuff here that can be brought here. In some ways, it's going to have a feeling a little akin to the back half of 2020, where we had widespread shutdowns in the start of the year. Then we kicked things back on. It was crazy levels of demand. And we're not anticipating that. That's the big difference, is we're not going to have surging year-over-year imports. Yep. But the short time horizons to get goods in. The West Coast ports are especially set to benefit from shipments for China because it's, a week shorter transit than if you're going to the East or Gulf Coast. And right now, every day counts because you've got 90 days to get this stuff in before potentially the 30% turns into 50 or 60% tariffs.
Terrific. Appreciate your thoughts and your data-driven thoughts. And folks, I'm telling you, you want to connect with or follow Dr. Jason Miller across social. This is, and I use this term, I call myself a supply chain nerd, and hopefully I think you embrace that as well, Jason Miller. And folks, that's who we learn from. So Jason, if folks don't find you and follow you on LinkedIn, how else can folks connect with you?
Yeah, just you can find my email real easily. Michigan State makes it straightforward. Just throw my name and MSU into Google, and I'll be the first thing that comes up. And the email address is right there.
And it is the Eli Broad supply chain management program, right? Eli Broad. I had to learn. I'm learning a new pronunciation all the time, and that's when I had to work on a little bit, Jason.
Yep, Broad is in road.
The Broad as in road. That's right. Great, excellent program. Always atop the rankings for supply chain programs. Okay, Bobby and Tandreia, I'm coming to you in just a second for your patented key takeaway from the last hour. As we've had the hall of supply chain justice between Tandreia, Bobby, and Jason here. Bobby, first thing we want to make sure to do is encourage folks, don't take our word for it. Download the Q1 2025 U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index down. You can go to freight.usbank.com, or even more convenient, you can check out the link that we've been dropping. But beyond that, Bobby, how can folks connect with you?
Email address, bobby.holland@usbank.com. I'm also available through LinkedIn. I lag a little bit on responses in LinkedIn, admittedly, just because I'm busy, but Bobby Holland at usbank.com, Bobby.Holland.
Bobby.Holland. Make sure you get that dot in, folks, if you want to be with or chat with the one and only. And again, great work, Bobby, as always. Really appreciate the collection of thoughts here. And Jason, I thought you started to say one of my favorite quotes I got from the Andy Griffith Show. Everyone talks about the weather, but no one does anything about it. I thought that's where you were going a second ago, but maybe next time. All right, so Tandreia, Bellamy, we have come a long way in an informative session. I've learned from all three of y'all. I appreciate your expertise and your observations. But if you had to pull out one thing, one key takeaway from the last hour talking here with you and Bobby and Jason, what would that be?
The importance of multiple information sources. There is just so much going on right now, and being informed is more important than ever.
That is right. That is right, especially at the velocity. And that velocity is not going to slow down ever. And I'm always hesitant to use the word never or ever, either word. But I think the velocity is only going to increase. We got to be informed with a variety of sources like never before. All right, folks, hopefully y'all have enjoyed this last hour. I tell you, really appreciate the opportunity to connect with Bobby and Jason and Tandreia. I want to thank them all. Bobby Holland, Director of Freight Business Analytics at U.S. Bank. Bobby, thanks for being here today as always.
Thank you.
And joined today by Dr. Jason Miller, Eli Broad, Endowed Professor of Supply Chain Management at Michigan State University. Go Spartans, go Sparty, whatever the right terminology is. But Jason, a pleasure to have you here as well.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You bet, folks. Make sure you connect and follow across social there. And again, Tandreia Bellamy, I appreciate you being here with me as we kind of deciphered what's been going on across the domestic freight market. Thanks for being here, Tandreia.
Thank you.
All right, folks. You got homework, though. You got homework. Take something you heard here today, because we got a truckload of takeaways. Take something you heard here today and put it into action. Share it with the team, right? Lots of opportunities to transform the global supply chain industry, both today and tomorrow, but it's driven by deeds, not words. With all that said, on behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton challenges you to do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. We'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Join the Supply Chain Now community for more supply chain perspectives, news, and innovation. Check out supplychainnow.com, subscribe to Supply Chain Now on YouTube, and follow and listen to Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts.